So I'll call the meeting to order. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Councillor Boddy. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. I note that there's a delegation from Stuart Doyle. Stuart is my landlord at my law office. I think under old rules, it would have been okay. Under Code of Conduct, new rules, I think I've got to be careful, so I'll declare that.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Council, I'm going to be asking for an amendment to the agenda, and I'm going to be looking for someone to make a motion that the agenda be amended to include one additional item, closed session item, regarding a proposed or pending acquisition of land by the municipality. We require a 2/3 vote to do so, but if we could put it on the floor, Councillor Burley, seconded by Councillor Mackey. We can't really discuss it, but I'm hoping that it'll pass. So all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much for that. Okay. Councillor Desai, I don't know that is there anything that you want to add? We're on item 3A. Is there anything that you want to add with respect to the withdrawal of your motion?
I spoke to my lawyer. It was our counsel. I spoke to Mr. Lacerno, and there's some concerns that he has with the bill, which I felt we needed to discuss further to make sure that we're not supporting unintended consequences. And so at this time I've withdrawn it. I will be talking with him, and we'll come back with something. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, our guests have been waiting very patiently. We're on to delegations. Starting with Stuart Doyle, Barry's Construction, with respect to an entrance permit. Good morning, sir.
Is that working? Good. Well, thanks for having us here this morning. I'm with Marcia back there, Marcia Jones. We're working for her to try to get an entrance into her home, so that's why we're here today. I'd like to thank County Council again for having us, and for staff for facilitating us, being helpful to get us here. It's a little bigger audience than I'm accustomed to addressing at council meetings, so I'll do my best and try to be brief, because I see you guys have quite a bit to do. So again, I'm Stuart with Barry's Construction. We are working for Marcia to try to get an entrance into her home here at 1188 2nd Ave West, which is obviously on the county road within the urban area of Owen Sound. And this particular home does not have a house or an entrance off of 2nd Ave West at the time. There's a small alley at the back that is owned by the city, which is not maintained by the city, that they currently use and share with several homeowners. It's narrow, it's obstructed, and it's difficult, especially during the winter months, for her to access her home. And so that's kind of the gist of the request. So the background is we had submitted an application to the county for this, with all the insurance, the fees, that type of thing. Worked through the transportation department. It was subsequently denied because the policies states that only one legal access is permitted for homes at front end of the county road. Again, this property has this narrow right-of-way at the back that doesn't work very well, and that's why we're here to ask for an exemption to that policy in this particular case. And again, being in an urban area, it's a little bit more unique than just a county road out in the rural development.
Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you for presenting today. My question is was this a new build? Is it infilled, or so? How come it didn't have a driveway? Like, I see the one beside it has a driveway, and I don't know if the other ones. I don't understand why it just never had a driveway. Most houses have a driveway, don't they? Maybe not. That's why. Is it infill?
Yeah.
No, and that's a great question. I'd address that a little bit later, but I suspect, well, these are obviously quite older homes here, been there for some time, and I suspect that the original intent was to use that alley at the back, which was at a previous point with the city, a longer alley that went right through the whole block and was maintained. Over the years, that sorry about that, that level of service has been reduced, and thus those homeowners on that. Seems like everybody's blinking here. Today. Okay, I didn't know if I was out of order there. Maybe my time was up. But so I suspect the original intent that would serve those homeowners, those taxpayers, with that level of service that's been reduced, and as such, that's why we're here, because it's being difficult.
I guess the reason why I raised the question is that one beside it has a driveway.
Yep, and it also has, through you, Mr. Warden, sorry, it also has access off the back. However, I suspect there's been quite a few exemptions over the years for this particular area, because of obviously within the urban area.
Sorry, maybe we could just let the, are you finished with your? Yeah, yes, that's what I thought.
However, I do appreciate the questions, thank you. So that's kind of a site plan here of the area. You can see the gravel alley at the back. Again, it's not maintained by the city any longer. It is routinely obstructed, only because of the nature of it, not that anybody's trying to, get one on their neighbor. It's more just because the nature of it is narrow and there's a lot of people using it. There's very little room to maneuver. The applicant, Marcia here, is the last one on the laneway, so that makes it even a little bit tougher. Maintenance in the winter has been eliminated, and they've also tried to work with the local bylaw, but as we know, there's not a whole lot they can do in a situation like that. So, the point there is that she's also tried other avenues to address this. This isn't the first place we're going. So there's just one quick picture. That's the end of her driveway. There's generally some obstructions in there. Again, a lot worse in the winter, and we can certainly bring some more pictures back if that would help once the snow flies. So that's just a quick, on this side here, schematic of the block between 11th and 12th. All the properties in yellow have driveways. It's the 4 at the end that the picture was that do not. So it represents about 80%. And I took that a little further. Between 10th to 12th on 2nd Ave, there's pretty well everybody has a driveway except for those folks. So again, what I'm trying to illustrate at that point is, future upgrades, if they did happen, another home on that street with a driveway is likely not going to impact the future or current use of that road. I think I've gone over most of that. So our request this morning, I guess I generally say this evening at council meetings, but this morning is for committee of whole to consider an exemption to the policy of allowing entrances on the county road, and I fully understand the need to have those policies and to restrict onto those collector roads. However, in certain circumstances, especially in urban areas where that built-up area has been established for very many years, perhaps a unique circumstance would warrant the consideration of exemption for this property. So, I know Marcia Jones just wanted to say a couple words, if that's okay.
That's fine.
I think you're set.
Good morning. My name's Marcia. Besides the inconvenience that we've had to deal with the driveway being blocked, not being able to have someone take care of the driveway in the wintertime, there's a lot of safety concerns I have. Like, I do have a younger daughter. It's dark in the alleyway in the evenings, especially, wintertime. It's hard for me to access without proper lighting. We have a lot of thefts that have happened in that alleyway with people. They're not visibly seen from the road. They come in, they steal things. It's become a little frustrating. It's more or less my issue.
Okay, Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Mr. Warden and County Council. Just to follow up, and I guess I'm looking at Pat. I don't know if you can go back to that part where it was the two-dimensional looking down, not the road and the, right there. So I guess seeing that the last 4 or whatever it is don't have driveways, Like, is that intersection, is there a stop sign? I guess my only question to you, Pat, is there concern of traffic going around the corner and somebody backing out, or is there an issue with liability in the sense of if it's permitted for traffic, seeing, visibility wise, and all those things? If we were to grant it.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, we have various concerns with this site. I don't know if this is something I'm going to bring back in a staff report, potentially, kind of our reasoning for why we're where we are. So I think that would be my preference rather than to try to get into verbal issues here, but.
So I think for the purposes of today, if you have questions for the delegates, there is going to be a staff report coming back for our consideration.
We need a resolution
For a staff report?
yes,
Okay.
which Brian O'Leary will move.
Mr. O'Leary.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. Do we need a motion for that? Okay, normally I would, like, I'm quite familiar with the area, and normally I would ask for an exemption, but I think in fairness to council, we'll ask for a staff report, and I'll do that in the way of a motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm looking for a seconder for that motion. Councillor Burley. Is there any discussion on that? On the motion for a staff report? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That is carried. Just in fairness to our delegates, is there any other questions that people had of the delegates?
Councillor Mackey does.
Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Warden. Just a question. I think you said that the city used to maintain the right-of-way, I assume it is, at the back that's shared by the four houses, and just when did the city stop maintaining it? And maybe that'll be part of the report as to why the city stopped maintaining it. Thank you.
There you go. So I spoke to one of the staff members at the city about this, and it appears, if you can look at the map there's an alley that goes right through the whole block, and then it kind of swings left and right at the end and out to Marcia's house. So I think they still do maintain part of it. However, they abandoned the maintenance on the north half. How long ago? I don't know how long ago that was. I can't answer that. But I suspect when they built the homes, that was the intent, that there'd be a serviced alley behind them, and that's why the entrances were not put off second.
So Councillor Mackey, I'm anticipating that issue and others will be addressed in the staff report to come back for our consideration. Okay, thank you. Oh, Councillor McQueen?
Just a quick question to you, Marcia. Do you feel that having a driveway there, safely you can egress or in and out safely without having any problems that way?
I would just ask you folks to use your microphones, please.
So is that intersection?
If you could just push the button, yeah.
There we go. Sorry. So the corner there has a stop sign. The Inner Township Fire Department is on the other side of it, and then there's no homes on the far side. So to be able to have a laneway on that side would make it easier to come in and out rather than maneuver around cars that have decided to park in the middle of the lane.
Councillor Keaveney. Councillor Keaveney, if you would just push your microphone.
There we go, sorry. Mr. Warden, thank you. I'm just curious to know, and I'm sure it will be in the staff report, is there on-street parking allowed where you are?
On 2nd Ave, there's no street parking. On 12th Street, there is.
Okay, I'm confident that we will have proper discussion once we have the staff report back. Thank you for the delegation. You have something else to say?
doesn't like me. Is there a way that we could be notified of the staff report somehow, just so we can, if we, want to speak again, or probably can't, but, attend at least?
Absolutely, yes. Okay, our next delegation, Dana Howes and Jerry Glover, co-chairs of the Grey Bruce Ontario Health Team Planning Committee. Hi, folks, thank you for waiting, and welcome.
I think I'm on. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, staff. I think the presentation's. Thank you for having us here today. If it's appropriate, I'll begin with just some high-level preference of our presentation. The purpose today of Dana Howes and I coming to present this delegation to County Council is to provide where we have been and where we seek to go during first year of a proposed Grey Bruce Ontario Health Team. We do recognize and appreciate there are many players and many sectors and organizations that will be involved throughout this journey. That being said, this is a multi-year phased-in committed approach that would be at least 5 to 10 years out. So we want to impress upon County Council and our partners in the region that people that may not be at the table during year one is not by innocent or it's not by overt omission, but rather it's a phased and methodical approach to lead towards the bigger vision, and through a phased-in approach and project management, different sectors would be onboarded, i.e. long-term care, homeless initiatives, and community paramedicine. The People's Healthcare Act received a third and final reading in Royal Assent on April 18, 2019. The new act will result in a significant change to our current healthcare system, including the creation of Ontario Health, which is a consolidation of provincial health agencies, the creation of Ontario Health Teams, which will bring together health care providers like hospitals, long-term care, primary care into one geography and a coordinated approach into one organization, the creation of a single province-wide supply chain model, and a permanent patient and family advisory council. As well, a 12-member board has been created by the Ontario government, and they were installed on March 8, 2019. By virtue of an order of council, appointments to the boards of members agencies, including local health integration networks, Cancer Care Ontario, eHealth, etc., were revoked on March 8th. Implementation of Ontario Health Teams are being introduced to provide a new way to organize and deliver services in local communities. Through this model, groups of healthcare providers will work together as a team to deliver a full and coordinated continuum of care for patients, even if they are not in the same organization or physical location. On April 3, 2019, the Ministry launched an open call for self-assessments for interested groups of providers and organizations to assess the readiness and begin working to meet the key readiness criteria for implementation. Ministry webinars and governance webinars have been held to date to educate us as a region and to inform our partner stakeholders. The Ministry of Health has asked for submissions from those communities who were interested in submitting a readiness assessment by May 15th. Over 150 readiness assessments were received by the ministry from across the province. 74 of those submissions were identified as being meeting core components. 31 of those 74 submissions have been invited to move to the next stage. The first stage being the readiness assessment, which is an arbitrary conceptual framework. If you're approved at that stage, you're invited to full application. The remaining 43 submissions have been identified as in development and require additional work prior to advancing, and the ministry has seconded transition teams to assist those regional sectors and organizations to meet the litmus test moving forward. A number of Ontario Health Teams to be approved in this first round has not been confirmed, but indications suggest up to 10. At this time, I'll turn over to my colleague, Dana Howes.
So in Grey Bruce, we have been meeting for several months about how we can best improve healthcare in Grey and Bruce counties for the people that we serve. We have done several engagement sessions with primary care providers in Markdale and in Hanover, as well as held governance sessions for our boards. So the group of providers that are working on this Ontario Health Team sort of originated from the Health Coalition, which is a long-standing committee here in Grey Bruce, about 20 years in operation. And it consists of acute care hospitals, so all 3 hospital corporations in Grey and Bruce counties, all family health teams, the Family Health Center, as well as home and community support, home care, nursing homes, and a multitude of other allied healthcare providers. And so from that group, a working group has been identified to work on some of the main components of what the government is looking for. And that is bringing together a solution that includes home care, acute care, mental health, and hospitals. So in May, we consciously chose not to submit our readiness assessment. We were still very much in the norming and forming stage and really wanted to make sure that what we submitted before the ministry was robust and was well thought out. However, we did submit a letter to the deputy indicating that we would be ready for the fall submission, which in fact moved actually more to a winter submission on the part of the government. So December 5th is the next intake date for readiness assessments. I'm happy to report that the small working group has completed that readiness assessment. And we are currently just finalizing and getting feedback on that. Where in year 1 we want to focus, and again, realizing that when we think about Ontario Health Team, it is not a sprint. It is a marathon of how we are going to form our team. We really focused on what are sort of the biggest health issues that we're facing across the healthcare sectors. And that is supporting care transitions of frail seniors throughout the continuums of care, as well as supporting patients living with mental health and addiction issues. So a note about the readiness assessment. To be clear, it is not how we're going to do that, but rather what it is that we feel is important to us, that we feel that we can make the biggest impact. Once we get past the initial readiness assessment, that's when we will dive into the how of how it will look for Grey and Bruce residents. So with respect to our next steps, we've got really lots undergoing. We have developed a website, and so that will launch November 1st, and it is greybruceoht.ca. And the reason why we felt it was important to create a website is we needed a common, accessible place for healthcare providers, organizations, and the general public to access this information. It's important that we are transparent through this process, and we really wanted to make sure there was an equitability to that information and the work that we're doing so that everybody can access the ongoings of the GB-OHT. We will continue to do engagement sessions because I think it's really important that everyone is informed of the work that we're doing. So we do have planned engagement sessions along the shoreline to engage primary care, as well as planned engagement sessions with local municipalities throughout Grey and Bruce to inform as well. Any questions?
Thank you for your presentation, councillors. Any questions? Councillor Milne.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just 2 questions. Number 1 would be, how do you envision the governance of this health team developing? Are you looking at a single board/corporation to encompass all of the continuum of care And is that where the accountability will lie? But if you're not going that and you're gonna work jointly, where is the accountability gonna lie with the Interior Health Team?
On? Okay, sorry. This is very high tech for me. So that's a really great question. In fact, that's a question that as a group, we have been really working on sort of in parallel to the work that we're doing with respect to what it is that we're going to impact for the people we serve in terms of healthcare. So I think it's fair to say that governance will evolve as we continue to mature. In the beginning, what you'll see is, I think what is fair to say is most likely it will be memos of understanding, that kind of thing, as well as in terms of accountability, having a scorecard that unites all of us, that all of us are accountable to, and all of individual organizations will be accountable to that as well. Add to that?
I would just say that, organically going forward, governance is a main perseveration, and we're optically sensitive to that. There are big and small players throughout the region. We recognize that governance right now is a small g for governance in the rearview mirror. It is there. We are optically sensitive and accountable to that. That being said, how governance transitions and transpires won't be known or understood probably till 3-4 years out. But what we do hope to achieve within the first 0 to 3 years is to identify one single organization within Grey Bruce, optimistically, that would act as a fund flow-through organization that would be accountable to have all the funding agreements and essentially disperse the payments to the respective organizations. So in terms of governance, we have a governance committee. They're looking at different governance frameworks in terms of alignment. We do view it maybe in one instance growing organically. There has been school thought of a new corporation. That being said, the ministry has no desire or appetite to fund a new corporation. It would be millions of dollars essentially taking away from frontline care. So we're trying to grow this organically through collaborative relationships and partnerships and via MOUs.
Thank you. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Warden. Thanks for the presentation. I'm still trying to get my head around the Ontario Health Team. So, the county provides paramedicine services, long-term care services. When the new concept is finally materialized, would the application for funding for paramedicine, let's say, will that go through the Ontario Health Team as opposed through the Ministry of Health?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. That is one of the many questions that we are currently struggling with and trying to better appreciate and understand. I think it's fair to say that at this point, this is a new concept, and the Ministry of Health is committed to ensuring the best patient care happen at appropriate time by the right provider in the right location. That being said, how that articulates down the ground, there's still some legislative changes and frameworks that need to occur. Our understanding is, say at 10 years out, that would optimistically be an ideal state. However, until we have some lessons learned and some feedback from those who have gone before us in Wave 1, there's still some uncertainty, and the government's been silent in terms of some of those considerations, but in an optimistic situation, that's ideally how it may look. That being said, there'd be much more engagement with civic councils and governments going forward to see how that would translate, but that wouldn't be for an immediate discussion or within our realm at this point.
Just to add, I think it's very important that everyone recognize there is no prescription for this. And so I think it is truly ours to author. And as we go forward, we may be unique and different in how we approach things as opposed to other Ontario Health Teams. So I think it's really one of those things that will evolve, and we will learn from the other Ontario Health Teams, but whether or not we choose the same path will be up to us based on decisions based on what is best for our region.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Klumpus.
Thanks very much, Mr. Warden, and thanks so much for your presentation. The question is with regard to planned engagement. I'm happy to hear that, of course, and the process in terms of where are you in the continuum of developing this idea that you want to become engaged at the local level and at the municipal level for input and for information sessions.
Thank you, Mayor, for that question. I can say that this has been an organic process that we are really trying to endeavor a walk before we run exercise to really try to understand what we're trying to sell and to make sure that right hand and left hand is providing that consistent information every time out of the gate. What I can say outside the 3 planned engagement sessions is now that we have completed the readiness assessment, which is amazing that that's been accomplished, we're going to park that optimistically in 2 weeks until the submission deadline. And then between now and December, hopefully Grey Bruce will be sick of hearing about us talking about OHTs. We're endeavoring to come out to small grassroots organizations, to host lunch and learns, to come out to primary care organizations, to hold the website accountable in terms of that single source of credible information in the event that you cannot get to Dana or I or a working group member. Anything essentially in our head will be on that website. We're completely committed to full transparency and having both hands on the table at all times. So anything we know, it will be on that website. Further, there will be a contact and get involved in section. So in the event there's questions or concerns from the general public or a system provider or stakeholder, feel free to reach through to us and we will certainly endeavor to circle back. But we do plan through the rest of the fall and winter to have engagement sessions throughout Grey Bruce.
Councillor Soever.
Yes. Have you reached out to the Northeast Grey Health clinics yet? The ones in Meaford and Thornbury? Are they part of this effort?
Thank you for that question. I can say that the Northeast Grey Community Health Centre has been involved to many of our collaborative discussions in terms of stakeholder groups. Al Madden from the CHC is also involved and on our working group. I can say that to the extent possible, any board and organization has been consulted or offered that invitation. And one further is that we've had a governance session to press upon the region in terms of our boards, CEOs, and executive directors what our potential options in terms of governance framework going forward would look like. And all board members from those respective organizations have been provided an invitation, and I do know a few of those members from the CHC that have been in contact with us to date.
Thank you for that. And now a little more difficult question. We have doctors in Clarksburg who are members of the Georgian Bay Family Health Team with offices in Collingwood, Wasaga Beach, Stayner, and Creemore, which of course is in the other county. So how does this concept of Ontario Health Teams deal with these kind of cross-border issues?
So certainly we will engage primary care providers and keep them informed of what we're doing here. The idea is, though, that all of this is permeable. People can access whichever health team makes most sense for them for whatever condition they're dealing with, and same with primary care providers. Ontario Health Teams, I think the big thing for providers is just to be aware of the work and to be included into the fold wherever and whenever it best suits.
And maybe if I could add to that, we are also endeavoring through the legislative change process. Prior to the current government, we were restricted or constrained by collaborative initiatives. So for the past 10 years plus, we've been all sitting around the same table identifying where the silos are at, but we've been handcuffed. Good, bad, or otherwise indifferent, now is a good opportunity. We're endeavoring a revenue-neutral exercise, looking at community stakeholders and equal partners and how we can identify hotspots through the region, including school boards, primary care, long-term care, and how we can redeploy those assets. The ministry used a term called resource dilution in terms of trying to stretch out our existing resources on a stress test to see how that looks, and then down the road we can make a funding application request. So to your point, we are trying to identify some of the patients in Grey Bruce have been precluded from access to team-based care, for instance. We are committed as a Grey Bruce OHT going forward that a patient needs to be redefined in that narrative, and the patient needs to be considered a system patient. So at any given instance in that system, that patient will be able to access the right service, the right provider at the right time at a location nearest to their home. So we're committed to that going forward. Some collaborative efforts are already in the works to ensure that's happening in the South. We're amalgamating some primary care teams. So good work is happening under the radar, but to your point, we are trying to figure out how those assets can be redeployed to provide the best patient care to those areas that are experiencing unmet need.
Okay, Dana and Jerry, good to see you. And thank you very much for that update. Okay, Council, we're looking at the consent agenda. Is there anything that requires a separate discussion? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you, I would request that we separate E, which is the Municipality of West Grey speeding on Grey Road 3 and Concession 6. Very quick question to the Director of Transportation.
We'll address that at the end. Councillor Soever.
Yes, I would like to pull F, which is the correspondence from the town of the Blue Mountains.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda, save items E and F. Looking, Councillor McQueen, seconded by Councillor O'Leary. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. All right, item 7A. Looking at proposed changes to the Aggregate Resources Act. Randy, you're on deck. I'm looking for a mover to put the item on the floor. Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Milne. Randy, you're on.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to provide an overview of the proposed changes to the Aggregate Resources Act. The Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry has released a summary of the proposed changes to the Act and are requesting comments by November 4th, 2019. We've reviewed those proposed changes and have provided comments which are included in the report. To date, what has been released is a summary of the proposed changes. And we note that it would be beneficial to see the actual proposed changes to the Act in order to better understand the changes being proposed. I'll note that the province has committed to providing those details and providing further consultation, which we're very supportive of. I'll just highlight some of the proposed changes. One change the province proposes is to create a more robust application process for existing operators that want to expand their operations to go below the water table. This would include increased public engagement as well. The province is also recommending clarifying that depth of extraction of pits and quarries is managed under the Aggregate Resources Act through the licensing process versus through municipal zoning bylaws that regulate depth of extraction through vertical zoning. And that in situations like that vertical zoning would not apply. County staff definitely supports a more robust application process for operations wanting to expand below the water table. We have had operations in the past that have proposed to extract below the water table, and these often raise concerns about potential impacts to the water. We often hear concerns from the public with respect to those proposed changes to those operations. With respect to clarifying that depth of extraction is regulated through the licensing process versus municipal zoning, part of the reason why municipalities have considered vertical zoning in the past is because currently there's very little opportunities for public engagement through that amendment process. But if the province is proposing to make more changes and have more public engagement for those types of applications, then I think that clarification makes sense when combined with that more robust application process. Some of the proposed changes relate to haul routes, and the province is proposing changes that would clarify that when the local planning appeal tribunal or the minister is making a decision about issuing or refusing an aggregate license, they cannot impose conditions requiring agreements between municipalities and aggregate operators regarding haul routes. The proposed changes also note that municipalities and aggregate producers may continue to enter into agreements on a voluntary basis. Haul routes can generate neighborhood concerns regarding noise, dust, vibrations, safety, and impacts to road infrastructure. And the use of haul road agreements is sometimes required when considerable upgrades to the roads are necessary to make a safe haul route. If haul route agreements are removed as a formal tool for addressing those impacts, then tonnage fees, those aggregate fees that municipalities receive, should increase. The province is not proposing changes to the aggregate fees at this time, but they have noted that they are interested in hearing feedback on those fees. County Council has suggested in the past that the tonnage fees should increase to 20 cents per ton. for upper tier municipalities. Currently, we receive 3 cents per ton. And that tonnage fees to local municipalities should also increase in order to negate the need for municipalities to enter into these haul road agreements. Haul road agreements, they take considerable time and expense in order to enter into those agreements. And Grey County has suggested over the past few years that the aggregate fees should be increased to get rid of that's burdensome, so to speak. This would also level the playing field across the province, as then every pit and quarry, whether it's existing or any new pits and quarries, would be paying the same amount as opposed to varying amounts negotiated through haul road agreements. Staff reports have been prepared in the past on this topic, and we have included a link in this report to the most recent staff report regarding this matter. Grey County has also appeared before delegations to previous ministers recommending that the aggregate fees be increased. And we have included in comments in this report that continues to recommend an increase in the aggregate fees. With respect to the proposed changes limiting the ability of LPAT to impose conditions related to haul road agreements, further clarification is required here. For example, if a municipality requests a haul road agreement and the proponent refuses or cannot reach an agreement, does that mean LPAT would refuse that proposal, or could it be approved without an agreement? It appears that the latter is the case, and if that is the case, staff recommend that haul road agreements should still be required if a municipality requests one, and if made voluntary, then the aggregate fees should be increased. So we're saying if agreements, haul road agreements are voluntary, aggregate fees should go up. Otherwise, municipalities, if they request a haul road agreement, one should be required. It would also be helpful to establish criteria for haul road agreements, as well as to identify enforcement rules around these haul road agreements as well. Another proposed change the province is considering is to improve access to aggregates in adjacent municipal road allowances through a simpler application process for existing operations. So this would be, rather than an amendment to license, or rather than a new application, it would be just an amendment to the license. And this would only be in cases where the municipality, of course, supported those changes. The new county official plan policies actually recognize opportunities to extract within road allowances, and even beneath roads, subject to the Aggregate Resources Act, and of course subject to the support from the road authority. Having a simpler application process could increase aggregate availability and allow for more options in developing a comprehensive approach to rehabilitation. This simpler application process should only be considered, though, where the proposal is to encroach into road allowance that won't impact the operation of that existing road. And of course, only when the municipality supports doing so. If the proposal is to extract within the road allowance, which causes the need to remove or relocate that road, either on a permanent or temporary basis, then we're suggesting a more robust application should be required, including consultation with adjacent municipalities, members of public agencies, etc. Staff are requesting further clarification on what is being considered in terms of that simpler application process, and again, I think more details will be provided by the province at a later date. There are some other changes being proposed, and staff have asked for further detail and clarification. As I mentioned, the province has noted they are committed to consult further on more specific details, and staff will continue to monitor that. We'll review those further details once they're released and provide a further staff report at that time. At this stage, we're recommending that the staff report be received and that the report be forwarded on to the province as Grey County's comments on the changes, and that the report be shared with local municipalities. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Randy. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. And through you to, well, I'm not sure whether it should be Randy or probably Pat. When you talked about, certainly the haul route agreements are very controversial. And I agree with you, it would be nice if the torque, I think it's the torque rate, could be increased. You mentioned the county thought 20 cents. I guess one question is, would that cover off our costs? And then secondly, what would a municipality's, a lower tier municipality's rate, what should that be to cover off the costs? Is there a mathematical equation based on the tonnage of the approved pit that we can come up with, you know, what the amount is that we should recommend? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Warden. Great question. We, in the past, have tried to calculate or formulate what that percent per ton should be in order to cover our costs. We did an exercise a few years ago, I think it was, maybe the previous director of transportation at that time, to calculate what we think from a county operations perspective, a county maintenance perspective, what the impact would be and how much maintenance costs that would result in. And at that time, we felt 20 cents per ton would achieve that. Of course, you know, things increase over time, right? So I think that was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, maybe, those calculations. We felt in 2017, when the last report was, that probably 20 cents per ton was still going to be adequate. But maybe Pat can speak to whether or not that should even be increased. I think the message is that if we're going to be looking at making haul road agreements voluntary, the area fees should be increased. And I think then there should be more consultation with respect to what those aggregate fees should be. At the time, we were thinking if the upper tiers get 20 cents, maybe the local municipality should also get 20 cents per ton. And I think we've heard from aggregate operators in the past as well that at least some of them are not opposed to looking at an increase in the aggregate fees because, again, it levels the playing field. Right now, we enter into haul road agreements depending on the potential impacts based on the current road situation. So you have one pit and quarry operator paying more per aggregate fee than maybe his or her neighbor because that existing pit has been operating for 20 years or more. So to me, by increasing aggregate fee, it levels that playing field across the province, and it also addresses both existing operations as well as future operations.
Mr. Hoyt?
Yeah, we've heard that a lot from our producers, that it's not fair that a new person has to do an agreement and an existing quarry doesn't. But I think even just to ever figure out if it's 20 cents or 3 cents or 10 cents, it depends on the location of the quarry. We have a lot of quarries that go directly from a county road to an MTO road, and there's lots that go right from a township road to an MTO road that don't ever touch a county road. So to even, you know, the fact that municipalities are getting money when it's on a county road and the county's getting money when it's on a municipal road, the whole system is not overly fair or accurate on what impact is really going on. I think the 20 cents was just something to figure that would give us enough to you know, keep our roads in better condition. On top of that, we're probably the biggest purchaser of aggregate anyway, you know, and the other municipalities as well. So the operators are going to get that back. Like, they're going to charge us more. We'll pay more seemingly for our aggregates. So it just makes it easy for us to maybe allocate that money directly to upgrading road structure.
Good.
Yeah, thanks for that response. And I certainly agree, Randy, with you know, the vision of raising the torque. I'd just like to have, you know, an actual equation that we could equate, you know, the number of tonnage to the number of kilometers of roads, you know, especially in the lower tier municipalities when we're having to do the road upgrades. There is a lot of resistance towards, you know, local taxpayers' dollars contributing towards the you know, haul route. You know, they certainly recognize that, you know, their responsibility to keep the road, but any upgrades, it's a challenge to the lower tier. So thank you.
Kim?
I wondered if consideration should be given to some further discussion with TAPMO. TAPMO, at one time, the top aggregate producing municipalities, had put forward a model, a financial model that suggested, well, it's quite different than what we have in front of us right now, but where discussions with TAPMO are and their support for what the province is proposing. A number of the things that they talked about back in 2017 are not in this proposal from the province, so maybe we need to reach out to them again and see where they're at.
Councillor McQueen.
certainly raising that rate for both county and municipality would be, I think, a great move, and TAPCO certainly did make those recommendations. I think it was up to 50 cents combined, wasn't it? 54. I know, going back to Pat's comments about the users of aggregate, I know that one just north of Singhampton, there's a lot of material leaving Grey County, so there's a lot of revenue that could be generated, and they're blasting every other day now. Like it's pretty amazing the amount of material. They got trucks lined up at 5:30 in the morning till 6 at night, and they're even running at sometimes longer hours than that. So that's a big quarry that, you know, and certainly gravel pits are certainly smaller. So certainly maybe that's a saw-off point to you, Councillor Mackey, of getting higher rates. I think it's interesting too that there needs to be more in depth for below the water table. I think that is a very big concern one. And I think it's more too when you get operators that apply for 1.5 meters above the water table, and then they make a submission to the site plan to go below. And right now, there's not a lot of process in place. So I guess just to you, Randy, for your interpretation, that process would be broader. Would be, I guess, hydro-Gs testing, and just I'm asking you to what you interpretate in there. That's a good thing. Currently now, how is it currently now compared to moving forward? I guess that's a question, because I know that is a great concern.
Great questions. There is in terms of the study requirements, there is quite a bit of studies required when you're going below the water table. So there's hydrogeological studies and other studies that are required in order to make sure that you're not going to impact the water table. I think what we've recommended in the past, though, is that there's only certain people that get circulated on some of those when they're proposing to go below the water table. So I think what they're suggesting here is that they're going to expand that application process, have more public engagement when operations are proposing to go below the water table. We haven't seen the details yet in terms of what that process looks like, and so that's again our comments. Seeing some of those details, so then we can further weigh in on whether or not that's something that we fully support. But the notion that to have a more robust application process is what the province is recommending or suggesting at this stage, which would include more public engagement. So more neighbors circulating is what we would like to see. Obviously making sure the municipalities and the county are part of that review process, as well as public agencies, conservation authorities, things of that nature.
So from that, because what the criticism has come in the past is, so they get the approval, they get the site plan, and then it's just a slight amendment, other than you have to do some work, but it's like a backdoor way of getting below the water table once you get established, right? And the other point is, I understand there's difference between going below the water table and pumping the water out, right? So there's certainly probably a different, because some of them they'll go as far as the high hole will go, and then the water stays there, right? Others, they pump the water out, right? So.
Okay, I think we've had discussion. Thank you for the report. So on the motion to receive the report and to forward it to the province, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much, Randy. Okay, moving to item 7B. Pat, you're on deck. I'm looking for on the widening acquisition of Grey Road 40. Councillor Woodbury moves, seconded by Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I wanted to thank Lacey Thompson for this report. She kind of pursues these issues, follows through, including negotiating with the property owners, prints all the figures, writes the reports, and then I make a minor change and I put my name on it and there it goes. So anyway, I wanted to thank Lacey for all this work. And she had to explain it to me a few times too, because it's very confusing. I think the first thing to look at is page 47. You can see the figure there. There's that area in yellow is the previously severed parcel of this farm. So as you can see there, it doesn't include the outbuildings. So this severance was basically they were hoping to include those buildings in that residence, but if you go to page 48, which is the legal plan, because they want to merge those together, they have to make other changes to the retained lot as well. So they had suggested that little part in green there, they were going to maybe just give us a corner of it. As part of the severance, we're taking the widening all along the property and a daylighting at the north corner, part 7. It's hard to see the numbers there, but we're taking 4, 5, and 7. And part 6 is on the retained, and we thought we could get the whole widening. We'll get the other parts under the severance, and then we thought we'd buy that little part 6 that's there for our policy amount of $1,000. So they were agreeable to do that. We've obtained, or we will obtain, the entire widening for the property, as we usually try to do in every severance. And then they would have their severance completed legally. And I think that's about it.
Any questions? Seeing none, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Okay, so we are now going,
We'll go back to the other two.
okay, thank you. I forget who pulled what. Councillor 6E, right?
Council Robinson.
Councillor Robinson?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through to the Director of Transportation, just wondering with regard to...
Sorry to cut you off. We have to get it on the floor, I'm being told by... So will you move? And seconded by Councillor Hutchinson. Okay, you're on now.
It's a super convenient way to cut conversation. I totally get it procedurally. So thank you very much. Through you to Director of Transportation, with regard to number E, which is the Municipality of West Grey speeding on Grey Road 3 and Concession 6, I was wondering what the next steps would be with regard to the request from West Grey Council.
Through you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, we will be evaluating that request. We have, actually, we were hoping to finalize that report today for our speeding traffic bylaw. We'll try to get out and do a quick assessment of this site, and because we've been including those requests, whether we recommend approval or not. So we'll work right away to try to get this spot evaluated.
Councillor Mackey?
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Just for clarity, is the request from West Grey to reduce the speed limit, or, I mean, when I read it, it just sounded like it was a policing issue. I mean, people speeding, that typically is a police issue, so I was just wondering why it came here.
Thank you. We did have a delegation at our West Grey Council, and they're just looking at that portion of the road, whether it will need in the future a turning lane with respect to where our landfill site is located in the former township of Bentic, which is right on Grey Road 3, whether it is a reduction of speeding, reduction of the speed limit because of the residential houses situated in the area, or markings on the roadway. Certainly our Chief of Police is very aware of this and has correspondence to that, and certainly with our Chief of Police and our West Grey Police Service, that will be addressed well in hand. But it was to notify the county because it is a county road. That's what we're looking at, just the best way to address the matter. I look forward to the report.
Thank you. So on the motion to receive this item, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Item 6F, dealing with the town of the Blue Mountains. I'm going to ask for Integrity Commission matter. I'm looking for a mover. Councillor Soever, seconded by Councillor Mackey. Councillor Soever.
Yes, this motion was passed by the Town of Blue Mountains Council on September 30th, and it's with regard to the Integrity Commissioner rulings, which seem to be all over the place. We get different advice from different Integrity Commissioners. So we were asking the province and asking for the county's support in that the province set up a searchable database which contains the Integrity Commissioner's decisions so that people could have reference, so you could understand when, when an issue came up, and the Integrity Commissioners could understand, what the past rulings have been. We're in a position right now, and we refer in the top of our letter to a situation where a county integrity commissioner may rule one way, and a local integrity commissioner, if they're using a different one, could rule a different way. So we were just asking for county support. So I see it's recommended just to be received, but we would ask that the county send a letter of support for that. Thank you.
I'll ask our clerk to address this.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Warden. I did reach out to Principals Integrity, who is the county's integrity commissioner, for their thoughts on the resolution. And Jeff Abrams provided me with some information. So there is an organization set up currently. It's the Municipal Integrity Commissioners of Ontario, MECO. And they are posting all of their Integrity Commissioner public reports on CanLII, which is a database of Canadian law. There isn't a robust, because the Integrity Commissioners just became mandatory in March, we have less than a year's worth of information presently, but they are underway in building that repository through their association. He also wanted to point out that as integrity commissioners, they deliver a broad variety of services that involve making recommendations to council, including potential sanctions, but also investigating and dealing with things informally as well. And those are kept confidential and therefore would not be permitted to be on a public website because they are informal, they're dealt with, and they never have a report presented to council. So their opinion was that right now, that work is actually underway to establish that repository of information from integrity commissioners across the province and have that available to the public for their information.
Well, you need to turn off. Now I can speak. Is that the end of your questions, Councillor Sweater? I would just ask if I could. The report, line 2, talks about this body serving in a quasi-judicial manner. I think I know the answer to that, but I think I would like the rest of council to be straightened out on whether this is a quasi-judicial role.
According to our integrity commissioner, it is not a quasi-judicial role. Once the decision is made, there is no route for appeal.
Oops.
That seems to be a difference of opinion too. Apparently you can ask for a judicial review of this decision, according to our integrity commissioner. So just points out and in fact, there has been an appeal to a judicial review of integrity commissioner, not an integrity commissioner ruling, but, so there is apparently room to go to a judicial review, so.
If I can add a little bit more detail, so integrity commissioners are statutory officers, but they don't need to be lawyers. You don't need to be a lawyer to be an integrity commissioner. While the role that they play is an aspect of the administration of justice in Ontario, the things that they do aren't always based on precedent. They sometimes make decisions to resolve matters, as Heather noted, informally, and there's not always a public report that could offer that precedent-setting value to what they do.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Madam Clerk, I'm thinking that this is probably a good time for us to break.
We can. I'm not sure how long the closed session.
Yeah, I'm wondering about that.
I think we can probably wrap it up in 15 minutes if people can hang in there.
How are we feeling? It's thought that in about 15 minutes, we should be able to deal with the item we need to deal with in closed session. If you'd like to continue on now? I see a lot of nodding heads, okay. Sorry?
Yeah, there's 2 items, but yes.
2 items, that's correct. Okay, so I'm going to call for a motion that we proceed into a closed session on the items that were listed, that was listed in the agenda and the item that was also added. So 2 matters. Moved by Councillor O'Leary, seconded by Councillor Bartnicki. All those in favor? Any opposed? We'll now go into closed session. Kim, who's required to stay and who's not?
So for the first matter, Michael, Randy, and Kevin should remain.
Okay, we'll move on to item number, wow, that's a little different than what we just had. Good volume. All right, item number 9, other business. Is there any other business? Seeing none, we'll proceed on to item number 10. Are there any notices of motion? And lastly, Councillor Desai moves that we adjourn, seconded by, we actually technically Councillor Burley. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. I would just remind everyone before you go running off, we're